Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video we're continuing our discussions of chapter 9, which is about basic maneuvers. So we're going to talk about hovering. So hovering is one of the coolest things you can do in a helicopter because nobody else can do it. So we're going to go through the different techniques. So how do you get into a hover? That's the first question. Well, really it's kind of simple, and we'll walk you through it here in a bit. But you start pulling some collective. As you pull collective, of course, you're increasing power, which means more left pedal, a standard helicopter. And you will try to come up vertically into a hover. So hover, usually we talk about a 2 to 3 foot skid height for a hover. That's pretty good. It keeps you into ground effect pretty solidly with little risk that you're going to catch a skid on something in the ground. You know, technically, if you're below 25 feet, people would call that a hover, but that's a pretty high hover. You know, I've seen some students where I will give them a little grief when they're on their solos. And I say, if I can walk under the helicopter and I'm 6'3", you're hovering a little bit high. So, the first thing we'll talk about is how do you take off into a hover? And then we'll talk about how do you turn in a hover. It's actually pretty simple to do. And, one of the things about a helicopter is that everything depends on everything. So as soon as you touch one control, you're going to have to make minor adjustments on the other controls. That's why I always say slow, smooth, small. That's what I like to tell people when they're trying to fly a helicopter. So there's this chart in the book, and they talk about things like if you push the cyclic forward, you might have to give it a little bit of left pedal, and the collective, you're going to have to adjust it in order to maintain your height. So if you pushed forward, depending on how hard you pushed, depends on how much collective you're going to need to maintain your hover height, because you tilted that lift forward. So you have less vertical lift now to maintain your altitude. And you might have to adjust the throttle as well. If you pull the collective up, you don't have a correlator and or governor, you might have to roll in some throttle. And of course, they have the different scenarios as well. What if I'm going a different way, and what if there's some wind and things like that. All right, and we'll try to cover all of that here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm back here at the Mount Pocono Airport, and let me go ahead and begin by trying to pick up this helicopter. Now, sometimes this is one of the hardest things for people to do. Way harder than a sim. The sims are always harder because there's no real feel. And of course, your field of vision is not the same as it is in a real helicopter. Now, I like to tell people that you should sit up straight in your chair. You should have your back firmly against the back of the seat, and your spine should be pretty much straight up and down. That helps you get a better feel for what's happening. So if I want to take off this helicopter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll in a little bit of power. Now, the Schweitzer manual actually says that you're supposed to roll it up to the bottom of the green and then start pulling collective and roll it off as you do. This is one way you can do a pickup in the Schweitzer. It's actually, in my opinion, not the easier way to go, but we'll try that one here. So I'm going to start pulling collective. You can see my manifold pressure is going up, and I have to roll off my throttle a little bit to stay in the green. And see how it's just starting to try to move a little bit to the right. All right, so let me just pause for a second. Whenever you're trying to pick up the helicopter, you're sitting straight up, you're looking out in front of you, and if you sense a little bit of movement, just stop. Just stop what you're doing with the collective. Just pause right there, and then fix it. In this case, I need to put in a little bit of left pedal. And once I've got that yaw under control, then I can continue. So let me unpause here. So it's going a little bit to the right. I put in a little bit of left pedal. I need a little bit more throttle now as I continue. A little bit more pedal, more pedal, more pedal. It's starting to get light, and it's trying to pick up. So let me pause there again. So as I pick up, I'm definitely going to have to put in left pedal. I might also have to put in left cyclic. And why is that? Well, the tail rotor is on the left side of this aircraft. And as I increase power to the main rotor, I'm also increasing power to the tail rotor. So I might have to push a little bit to the left to keep from drifting to the right. Now, something I see a lot is students that have a hard time knowing when to use cyclic and when to use the pedal. And again, if you're looking straight out, you'll notice, and if again, your back is straight up and down, you'll notice the difference between yawing and drifting. It'll become very apparent. If you're still looking the same direction, but you're not on the center line anymore, you're drifting. Pretty simple. Right? So let me see if I can salvage this. This is kind of challenging to pause in the middle of a pickup, but we'll see what happens. So I put in a little bit of left. All right, I have to give a little bit of throttle here. And let me see if I can gently drift back over to the middle. And now I'm in a hover. Now I'm in a slight forward movement. See if I can arrest that movement. Just try to stay right in one spot. And I'll bring it down by dropping the collective just ever so slowly. Ever so slowly. Ever so slowly. And then all the way down. And watching my RPMs as well. Okay, so that's how I can pick up into a vertical takeoff. And so what did I do again? I looked right out in front of me. I slowly pulled up the collective, watched my RPMs. The second I felt any kind of a motion, I fixed it. In this case, the first thing you're going to feel is a right yaw. So you push the left pedal till it stops. You pause. You don't pull any more collective. Keep it right where it was. And then you fix it. And then you keep on pulling collective. And you keep pulling it. And as I said, and as we saw, you might also have to give it a little bit of left cyclic. Okay, so let me pop back up into the air. And let's see if we can taxi down the runway a little bit. And then we'll do some turns in a hover. So let me roll in some power. Trying to keep in the green. So I have to roll off a little bit of throttle here. Some back in, a little bit of left pedal, a little bit of left cyclic, and we're off. And let me just gently, slow, smooth, small, I'm going to push forward a little bit and start hovering in a forward direction. As I move, I'm dropping the collective a little bit, because if I don't, I'm just going to get too high. Right? I want to stay in a fairly low hover here. And of course, the faster I go, the easier this is. All right, now, if I want to slow down, because I am going a little bit faster, I just gently pull aft and drop the collective a little bit so I don't balloon up. So I'm just going a little slower, and now watch my RPMs. Bring the collective back in. Just trying to hold it right here. Alright, so I'm going at a very slow hover forward speed now. I'll just put it down for a second. Alright. And now I'm going to do some turns. So let me pull it back up. And if I want to do a hover turn, it's pretty simple. I just push in some pedals. I push a little right pedal here, and I'm making a hover turn to the right. Stop applying the pedal, and it will stop my turn. And I can turn pretty quickly in most helicopters if I really mash the pedal, but you don't want to do that. Alright, so let me go ahead and bring it in, and then I will put it down. So I always tell people that a little bit of forward motion when you're trying to do a set down is a good thing. If you're trying to do a set down and you try to come straight down on your point, you tend to kind of flop around in the air a little bit. Has a lot of yawing as you're coming in and decreasing the power, and it's really hard to do. But if you're going even half a knot, just a barely perceptible amount of forward speed, it makes it way easier. There's a couple reasons for that. One of the reasons is that when you have the forward speed, you do have, yes, the stabilizers are doing a little bit something for you. But even more than that, the rotor system becomes so much more efficient with just a little bit of forward motion. And you also have a little bit of momentum going that way. So that makes it easier for you to maintain a course. Think of it like riding a bike. If you're riding a bike at a half mile per hour, it's hard to go straight. But if you're going 20 miles an hour on your bike, it's easy to go straight now. So other kinds of hovering motion, we can go forward as we normally do. We can hover sideways, and we can also hover backwards. Now, I will say this, I often do this as a training exercise, but as a general rule, you want to hover forward for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can see better. Number two, you're much less likely to do things like accidentally strike the tail. And number three, it's a lot more efficient. The helicopter was designed to go forward. If you're going sideways or backwards and you accidentally contact the ground, you're probably going to roll your helicopter. So just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it all the time. And if there's strong winds, sometimes people will get lazy and they will try to point the nose of the helicopter into the wind and taxi sideways. Well, you can do it, but what happens if you were to contact the ground like that? Again, you'll probably roll the helicopter. So let me do a quick demo of sideways and rearward flight. Some tips on this, again, be looking out in front of you. You can also look to the side if you're trying to taxi in a certain direction. All right, so let's try a little bit of sideways hovering. Very common exercise that we do in flight training where we'll start with a forward taxi transition to a sideways taxi going the same direction, then to a reverse taxi, and then a sideways taxi, and back to a forward taxi. So it's kind of fun to do. It's somewhat challenging, especially in a simulator, but I'm going to give it a shot here. Something you should know. Some helicopters really don't taxi back that fast, and the Schweitzer is one of those. So on a windy day, if you're trying to taxi backward into a tailwind, you might not be able to do that. And of course, the flight surfaces are set up assuming that you're going to go forward most of the time. So there's a lot of drag on the fuselage, and there's other reasons why this isn't a great thing to do normally, but it is something that's fun to do sometimes if you have a calm day. So let me go ahead and give it a shot. I'm going to go ahead and give it some left pedal. I'm going to push the right cyclic. See if I can still move this way. Turn, do a little pedal turn, flying backwards, and we turn right this way, and I'm going to fly sideways again. And then back, little left pedal, and now I'm into a forward taxi again. So that's some of the basics of, how do I come up into a hover, how do I taxi in a hover, how do I do hover turns, and then again, how do I set down. So let me go ahead and I'm going to start pulling aft a little bit on the cyclic, just slow myself down, and as I slow myself down and initially drop the collective so I don't balloon up, and then I'm going to start bringing in more collective, bringing in more collective, more collective, more collective. Just dropping it. Sorry, I said more collective. I'm dropping the collective, and now I'm on the ground, so I drop it fully. Okay, so that is a little bit of hovering flight.